Hey, what happened to you? I will bring this city down because of what they did to you!
What would you do if you saw someone hiding pain behind their smile, and you had the power to change everything? Before we dive into this incredible story, please hit that like button, share this with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Lifted Stories. We want to hear from you too. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our amazing community around the world. Sophie Martinez stood behind the polished counter at Moonlight Restaurant, her hands shaking just a little as she poured water into crystal glasses. The restaurant sparkled like a jewelry box. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen stars, and soft music floated through the air like whispers. Rich people in expensive clothes laughed and clinked their glasses together, celebrating things Sophie could only dream about. She tugged at the long sleeves of her black uniform, making sure they covered her wrists completely. The fabric felt hot against her skin, even though the restaurant kept the air conditioning cold enough to raise goosebumps. But Sophie needed those sleeves. She needed them more than she needed to be comfortable. "Table 7 needs bread," her manager Carlos called out, snapping his fingers. Sophie nodded quickly and grabbed the silver basket filled with warm rolls. She walked carefully between tables, keeping her eyes down, trying to be invisible. That was her survival trick. Be quiet. Be small. Don't let anyone really see you. Table 7 sat in the corner by the huge windows that looked out over Chicago's glittering skyline. Only one man sat there, and Sophie's breath caught in her throat when she approached. He was tall, even sitting down she could tell. His suit probably cost more than her entire year of rent. Dark hair swept back from his face, and his eyes were the color of storms, gray and sharp and missing nothing. Dominic Sterling. Everyone in Chicago knew that name. Billionaire. Business genius. The man who could buy and sell entire companies before breakfast. "Your bread, sir," Sophie said softly, placing the basket on the table. She turned to leave quickly. "Wait." His voice was calm but strong, the kind of voice that made people stop without thinking. Sophie froze. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophie, sir." She kept her eyes on the floor, on his polished black shoes that probably cost more than her car. "Look at me, Sophie." Her heart hammered. She didn't want to look up. She never wanted anyone to look too closely. But something in his voice made her lift her chin slowly, meeting those gray eyes. Dominic Sterling studied her face for a long moment. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or concern. "How long have you worked here?" he asked, his voice gentler now. 6 months, sir." "You're excellent at your job. Very professional." He paused, still watching her with that intense gaze. "But you look tired. Are you feeling all right?" Sophie's throat tightened. Nobody asked her questions like that. Nobody looked at her long enough to wonder. "I'm fine, sir. Thank you." She started to turn again. "Your sleeve is rolled up a little," he said quietly. Sophie's blood turned to ice. She looked down and saw it. The fabric had slipped just an inch, revealing a purple-blue mark on her wrist. A mark shaped exactly like fingers. Like someone had grabbed her and squeezed until her bones felt like they would snap. She yanked the sleeve down so fast she nearly knocked over his water glass. "I'm sorry, I should get back to work." The words tumbled out in a panic. "Sophie." His voice stopped her again, but this time it was different. Softer. Sadder. "Those marks. Someone hurt you." It wasn't a question. It was a fact, spoken with such certainty that Sophie felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back hard. She couldn't cry. Not here. Not now. If she cried, Carlos would yell at her. If Carlos yelled, she might lose this job. If she lost this job, she would have no money. And if she had no money, she couldn't help her little sister Rachel with college, and she couldn't ever escape. "I fell," she whispered, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. Dominic Sterling leaned back in his chair, but his eyes never left her face. I've seen many things in my life, Sophie. I know what falling looks like. And I know what fingerprints look like. Sophie's hands trembled. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling cold despite her hot sleeves. Please, she breathed. Please don't make this a thing. I need this job. I'm not trying to get you in trouble, Dominic said, his voice steady and sure. I'm trying to help you. Who did this? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Sophie knew she should walk away. She should lie again. She should protect the secret she had been carrying for 8 months. The secret that weighed more than mountains and hurt more than the bruises hidden under her clothes. But something about this man, this stranger in his expensive suit with his storm-gray eyes, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, someone actually cared. His name is Tyler Blackwood, she whispered, so quietly that Dominic had to lean forward to hear her. The change in Dominic's face was instant. His jaw tightened. His hands, which had been relaxed on the table, curled into fists. Tyler Blackwood, he repeated, and the way he said the name sounded like a door slamming shut. The lawyer. Samuel Blackwood's son. Sophie nodded miserably. His father owns half the judges in this city. Tyler says if I ever tell anyone, he'll make sure I lose everything. My job. My apartment. He'll hurt Rachel. Her voice cracked on her sister's name. Dominic was quiet for a moment, but Sophie could practically hear his mind working, turning over information like pages in a book. How long has he been hurting you? He asked. 8 months. We met at a coffee shop. He was so nice at first. So charming. He bought me flowers and took me to fancy places and made me feel special. Sophie's words came faster now, like water pouring through a crack in a dam. But then he started getting angry about little things. He didn't like my friends. He didn't want me talking to other men. He said I dressed wrong, talked wrong, thought wrong. And when I didn't change fast enough, he would grab me, push me, hurt me. And the police? Dominic asked. Sophie laughed, but it was a hollow, broken sound. The police work for his father's friends. The one time I tried to file a report, the officer made a phone call and suddenly my complaint disappeared. Tyler came to my apartment that night and told me if I ever tried that again, Rachel would have an accident. Dominic Sterling stood up slowly. He was even taller than Sophie had thought, and something about the way he moved reminded her of a lion, powerful and purposeful. Sophie, he said, looking directly into her eyes. I'm going to help you. Tyler Blackwood is going to pay for what he's done. Not just to you, but to everyone he's ever hurt. And I promise you, on everything I have, that you and your sister will be safe. Sophie wanted to believe him. But she had stopped believing in rescue a long time ago. You don't understand, she said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. Men like Tyler don't lose. Men like him always win. Dominic Sterling reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He placed it gently on the table. Men like Tyler have never faced someone like me, he said quietly. Call this number tomorrow morning. I'll be waiting. He left cash on the table, far more than his meal cost, and walked toward the door. Sophie stood frozen, holding the business card in her shaking hands, wondering if she had just met a miracle or made the biggest mistake of her life. Sophie didn't sleep that night. She sat on her small bed in her tiny apartment, staring at Dominic Sterling's business card until the words blurred together. The bruises on her arms throbbed with each heartbeat, reminding her of Tyler's last visit 3 days ago. She remembered that night clearly, even though she wished she could forget. Tyler had shown up at her door after midnight, angry because she hadn't answered his calls fast enough. He said she was ignoring him on purpose, that she thought she was too good for him. His hands had found her wrists, squeezing until she cried out, and then he had smiled that terrible smile and said, "Nobody will ever believe you over me, Sophie. Nobody. But maybe someone would. Maybe Dominic Sterling was different." When the sun finally rose over Chicago, painting the sky pink and gold, Sophie picked up her phone with trembling fingers and dialed the number on the card. Dominic answered on the first ring. "Sophie," he said, like he had been waiting just for her call. "Thank you for trusting me." Can you meet me at my office this morning? I have something important to show you. 2 hours later, Sophie walked into Sterling Tower, a building so tall it seemed to touch the clouds. The lobby was all marble and glass, and her worn sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. She felt small and out of place, like a sparrow in a palace. Dominic's assistant, a kind woman named Maria, led Sophie to an office on the 40th floor. The view took Sophie's breath away. She could see the whole city spread out below like a sparkling blanket. Dominic stood by the window, and when he turned to greet her, his expression was serious but gentle. "Please sit down," he said, gesturing to a comfortable chair. "I spent last night making some calls and doing research. What I found made me very angry, Sophie. But it also made me more determined to help you." He opened a folder on his desk and slid it toward her. Inside were photographs and documents, pages and pages of information. "Tyler Blackwood has hurt other women," Dominic said quietly. "Many other women. I found 11 victims willing to talk, and I suspect there are more who are too afraid to come forward." Sophie's hands shook as she looked through the papers. Names. Faces. Stories that sounded exactly like hers. Women who met Tyler and thought he was wonderful at first. Women who found themselves trapped when his true nature emerged. Women who tried to speak up and were silenced by money, threats, and power. "This woman, Jessica, worked at a bookstore," Dominic explained, pointing to a photograph of a young woman with sad eyes. "Tyler dated her for 6 months. When she tried to leave him, he had his father's lawyers threaten to sue her family's business into bankruptcy. She stayed quiet. This one, Amanda, was a teacher. Tyler broke her arm. When she went to the hospital, a lawyer showed up and offered her money to say she fell downstairs. She needed the money for her mother's medical bills, so she took it and signed papers promising never to speak about Tyler again." Sophie felt sick to her stomach. All these women. All this pain. And nobody stopped him. "His father's law firm is one of the most powerful in Chicago," Dominic said, his voice hard as stone. "Samuel Blackwood has connections to judges, politicians, police chiefs. He's been cleaning up his son's messes for years, making problems disappear with money and threats. Tyler learned that he could do anything he wanted because Daddy would always protect him." "Then how can we stop him?" Sophie asked, feeling hopeless. "If all these women couldn't do it, how can I?" Dominic sat down across from her and leaned forward, his gray eyes intense and focused. "Because this time, he's not just facing scared women alone. He's facing me. And I have resources, connections, and power that can match his father's. But more importantly, I have something Samuel Blackwood doesn't have." "What's that?" Sophie whispered. "The truth. And the will to make sure everyone hears it." Dominic paused, and something painful crossed his face. "I need to tell you something, Sophie. Something personal. So you understand why this matters so much to me." He stood and walked back to the window, staring out at the city. "When I was 12 years old, my mother was in a relationship with a man who hurt her. He was charming and successful, just like Tyler. And he had powerful friends, just like Tyler. My mother tried to leave him several times, but he always found her. He threatened to take me away from her. He said he would ruin her reputation. Make everyone think she was crazy." Sophie's heart ached for the little boy Dominic had been. "One night, it got so bad that my mother ended up in the hospital. I was there. I saw what he did to her. And I watched as police officers and lawyers made it all go away. They said it was an accident. They said she was clumsy. They said she was lying." Dominic's voice grew rough with old anger. "My father had died 2 years before, so we had no protection. No power. We were alone." He turned back to face Sophie, and she saw tears shining in his eyes. "My mother survived, but she was never the same. She lived in fear for years until that man finally moved away and forgot about us. I promised myself then that when I grew up, when I had power and money and influence, I would never let another woman suffer like my mother did. I would use everything I had to protect people who couldn't protect themselves." Sophie understood now. This wasn't just about justice for Dominic. This was personal. This was his way of saving his mother, even if it was years too late. "I'm so sorry," Sophie said softly. "Don't be sorry," Dominic replied. "Be brave. Because together, we're going to do what nobody did for my mother. We're going to stop Tyler Blackwood." Over the next week, Sophie's life transformed in ways she never imagined. Dominic hired security guards to watch her apartment and protect her little sister Rachel at college. He arranged for Sophie to take time off work with full pay. He introduced her to a lawyer named Patricia Morrison, a powerful senator who had been fighting against domestic violence for decades. Senator Morrison was a strong woman with silver hair and eyes that burned with purpose. She listened to Sophie's story without interrupting, taking notes and nodding with understanding. "Tyler Blackwood's pattern is classic," Patricia said when Sophie finished. "Charm, isolate, control, abuse, threaten, silence. He's done this so many times that he thinks he's untouchable. But patterns can be broken, Sophie. And monsters can be exposed." They began building a case carefully and quietly. Dominic's investigators gathered evidence. Patricia reached out to the other victims, offering them legal protection and support. Sophie gave statements and answered questions until her voice grew hoarse. But Tyler noticed something was wrong. He always had a sixth sense for when his control was slipping. He started calling Sophie constantly. When she didn't answer, he sent threatening messages. "You think you're smart? You think someone cares about you? You're nothing, Sophie. You'll always be nothing." Then came the message that made Sophie's blood run cold. "I saw Rachel at her college library today. She's so focused on her studies. It would be a shame if something happened to distract her." Sophie showed the message to Dominic immediately. His face went pale with rage. "He just threatened a witness's family in writing," Dominic said grimly. "He's getting desperate. That's good for us, but it also means he's dangerous. We need to move faster." That evening, they held a meeting in Dominic's office. Sophie, Dominic, Senator Morrison, and 3 of the other victims, Jessica, Amanda, and a woman named Claire who Tyler had terrorized at her workplace. "We're going to hold a press conference," Patricia announced. "All of you together. 11 victims standing united, telling your stories publicly. The media will be there. The police will be there. And Tyler Blackwood's reign of terror will end." Sophie felt fear grip her chest like an iron hand. What if he comes after us? What if his father makes this all disappear like before? Senator Morrison smiled, but it was fierce and determined. "He can try. But he's never faced public pressure like this. When 11 women stand together with evidence, with witnesses, with powerful allies, the world pays attention. And bullies like Tyler Blackwood hate attention. They prefer shadows." Dominic placed a hand on Sophie's shoulder. "You won't be alone. I'll be right there with you. Every step of the way." Sophie looked around the room at the other women, women whose eyes reflected her own pain and fear. But she also saw something else in those eyes. Strength. Hope. Determination. "Okay," Sophie said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Let's do it. Let's stop him." The press conference was scheduled for the following Monday at City Hall. 3 days away. 3 days for Sophie to find courage she didn't know she had. 3 days for Tyler to realize his perfect life was about to crumble. That night, Sophie stood in Dominic's office after everyone had left. The city lights twinkled below like a million promises. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing me, for helping me, for caring." Dominic stood beside her, and when he spoke, his voice was warm and full of something Sophie was afraid to name. "You're not just a victim, Sophie. You're a survivor. And survivors change the world. Monday, Tyler Blackwood will learn that lesson the hard way." Sophie nodded, feeling something shift inside her chest. For the first time in 8 months, she felt something she thought she had lost forever. She felt hope. Monday morning arrived with storm clouds gathering over Chicago, as if the sky itself knew something big was about to happen. Sophie stood in front of the mirror in a hotel room Dominic had arranged for her safety, staring at her reflection. She wore a simple blue dress that Patricia had helped her pick out. For the first time in months, she didn't have to hide her bruises. The fading marks on her wrists would be visible to everyone today. That thought should have terrified her. Instead, it made her feel strangely powerful. A knock on the door made her jump. Dominic entered, looking serious but steady in his dark suit. "The other women are ready," he said gently. "The press is gathering at City Hall. Are you sure you want to do this?" Sophie took a deep breath and nodded. "I've been silent for too long." "We all have." The drive to City Hall felt both too long and too short. Sophie sat in the back of Dominic's car, watching Chicago pass by through tinted windows. Somewhere in this city, Tyler Blackwood was probably having breakfast, not knowing his world was about to explode. City Hall's main conference room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall like a firing squad. Reporters filled every seat, notebooks ready, phones recording. Sophie saw police officers standing along the walls, and her stomach twisted with old fear. But then she noticed Captain Sarah Chen, the new police chief who had just taken over last month. Captain Chen had a reputation for honesty and fairness, and she stood with her arms crossed, watching everything with sharp, intelligent eyes. Senator Patricia Morrison stood at the podium, looking strong and unshakable. Behind her, 11 chairs waited in a row. Sophie took her place in the middle chair, with Jessica on one side and Amanda on the other. The other survivors sat beside them, a united wall of courage. Dominic stood off to the side, but Sophie could feel his presence like an anchor, keeping her grounded. Patricia began to speak, her voice carrying through the room with authority. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we are here to expose a pattern of abuse that has been hidden for too long. Tyler Blackwood, son of Samuel Blackwood of Blackwood Legal Firm, has terrorized and hurt women across this city for years. His father's money and connections have kept him protected, but today, that protection ends." She gestured to the women behind her. "These 11 brave survivors are here to tell their stories. They represent dozens more who are still too afraid to come forward. But their courage today will change that. It starts now." One by one, the women approached the microphone. Jessica spoke about the threats to her family's business. Amanda described her broken arm and the lawyers who paid her to stay quiet. Claire talked about losing her job after Tyler complained to her boss when she refused to date him anymore. Then it was Sophie's turn. Her legs felt like water as she stood and walked to the podium. The cameras focused on her, red lights blinking like little eyes. She could see reporters leaning forward, hungry for the story. "My name is Sophie Martinez," she began, and was surprised by how steady her voice sounded. 8 months ago, I met Tyler Blackwood at a coffee shop. He seemed perfect, and successful, interested in me. But that was just a mask. She told them everything. The isolation from her friends. The first time he grabbed her wrist so hard it left marks. The escalating violence. The threats against her sister Rachel. The police officer who made her complaint disappear with one phone call. "Tyler Blackwood told me I was nothing," Sophie said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "He said nobody would ever believe me. He said his family's power made him untouchable." She looked directly into the cameras. He was wrong. The room erupted with questions from reporters, but Patricia raised her hand for silence. "We have provided evidence to the police," she announced. "Text messages, medical records, testimony from witnesses. Captain Chen has assured us that a full investigation will begin immediately." Captain Chen stepped forward, her face serious. "Tyler Blackwood is now officially a person of interest in multiple assault cases. We take these allegations very seriously, and unlike in the past, there will be no interference in this investigation." Sophie returned to her seat, feeling like she had just run a marathon. Jessica squeezed her hand, and Amanda whispered, "You were amazing." But the relief was short-lived. Dominic's phone buzzed urgently. He looked at the screen, and his face went pale. He rushed over to Sophie. "Tyler just showed up at your apartment building," he said quietly but urgently. "Security stopped him, but he's threatening to hurt anyone who gets in his way. We need to get you somewhere safe now. Everything happened fast after that. Police rushed out to respond to the situation. Dominic, Sophie, and the other women were escorted to a secure location in Sterling Tower. Sophie's heart pounded as she thought about Tyler's rage, his desperation, his dangerous unpredictability. "Rachel," Sophie gasped. "Is she safe?" "Already protected," Dominic assured her. "I have my best security team with her. Tyler can't get near her." They watched the news coverage from Dominic's office. Every channel showed the press conference. The internet exploded with the story. People shared the videos. Comments poured in from other women who had similar experiences with powerful men. The hashtag Justice for Survivors started trending across the country. Then breaking news flashed across the screen. Tyler Blackwood had been arrested trying to flee Chicago. Police found him at a private airport, attempting to board a plane to a country without an extradition treaty. He had fought the officers, screaming that they couldn't do this to him, that his father would destroy them all. But Samuel Blackwood's power was crumbling too. Within hours, several of his law firm's biggest clients announced they were ending their contracts. Politicians who had accepted his donations rushed to return the money. Judges who had favored his cases suddenly faced ethics investigations. The empire built on silence and fear was falling apart, one brick at a time. Sophie watched Tyler's arrest on the screen, this man who had haunted her nightmares for so long, now in handcuffs, looking small and pathetic and defeated. She expected to feel triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. And free. "It's over," she whispered. Dominic stood beside her, his hand finding hers. "It's over," he agreed. The trial took 3 months. Tyler faced charges for assault, harassment, stalking, and witness intimidation. One by one, the survivors testified. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury took only 4 hours to find him guilty on all counts. Tyler Blackwood was sentenced to 12 years in prison. His father's law firm closed its doors permanently, destroyed by scandal and the weight of its own corruption. But for Sophie, the real healing began after the verdict. She moved out of her tiny apartment and, with Dominic's help, found a beautiful place by Lake Michigan. It had big windows that let in sunlight, and she could hear the gentle sound of waves from her bedroom. Dominic visited often, bringing groceries, books, and his steady, comforting presence. Their friendship deepened into something more precious. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply showed up, day after day, proving through actions that not all men were like Tyler. That love could be patient and kind and safe. One evening, 6 months after the trial, they stood on Sophie's balcony watching the sun set over the lake. The sky blazed orange and pink and purple, painting the water with liquid gold. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Sophie said softly. "Happy. Safe. Like I have a future." Dominic smiled, and it transformed his usually serious face into something warm and wonderful. "You always had a future, Sophie. Tyler just tried to steal it. But you took it back." "We took it back," Sophie corrected, squeezing his hand. "I couldn't have done this without you." They had started a foundation together, using Dominic's resources and Sophie's understanding to help other survivors of domestic violence. They provided legal support, safe housing, counseling, and most importantly, the message that speaking up matters. That nobody has to suffer alone. Rachel visited often, thriving in college now that the shadow of Tyler's threats had lifted. She was studying law, inspired by her sister's courage, determined to help others fight for justice. The other survivors had found their own paths to healing too. Jessica opened her own bookstore. Amanda became a teacher again, this time at a school that valued and protected its staff. Claire started a support group that met every week, offering friendship and hope to women escaping dangerous situations. On the 1-year anniversary of the press conference, Sophie stood in front of a crowd at a survivors' rally. Hundreds of people had gathered, holding signs and candles, united in the belief that everyone deserves to be safe and respected. "A year ago, I thought I was nothing," Sophie told them, her voice carrying across the crowd. "I thought I was powerless. I thought my pain didn't matter. But I learned something important. Our voices matter. Our stories matter. And when we stand together, we are unstoppable. The crowd cheered, and Sophie saw so many faces reflecting her own journey. Faces that had known fear but chose courage. Faces that had experienced darkness but found light. That night, Sophie and Dominic walked along the Lake Michigan shore. The moon hung fat and bright in the sky, casting silver light across the water. Waves whispered against the sand like gentle promises. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic asked. Sophie smiled, feeling peace settle into her bones like a warm blanket. "I'm thinking about how life can change in unexpected ways. How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best ones. How pain can be transformed into purpose." She looked up at him, this man who had seen her bruises and decided to help instead of look away. This man who had kept every promise. This man who had shown her what real love looked like. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am," she continued, "for second chances, for healing, for you." Dominic wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and they stood together watching the moonlight dance on the water. "Healing isn't a straight line," he said quietly. "There will be hard days ahead. Memories that hurt. Fears that creep back in." "I know," Sophie replied. "But I'm not facing them alone anymore. And that makes all the difference." They walked back to Sophie's home, to the place filled with sunlight and safety and new beginnings. Inside, Sophie had hung a photograph from the press conference, all 11 women standing together, their faces determined and strong. Below it, she had written words that had become her daily reminder. "Courage is contagious. Speaking up saves lives. You are never alone." Tyler Blackwood was in prison, paying for his crimes. The Blackwood empire had crumbled into dust. But more importantly, 11 women had reclaimed their voices, their power, and their lives. They had turned their pain into protection for others. They had transformed fear into hope. And Sophie had learned the most important truth of all, that healing is possible when you have courage, support, and love that respects your worth. That monsters can be defeated when good people refuse to stay silent. That sometimes, in the darkest moments, unexpected heroes emerge to remind you that you matter. As Sophie fell asleep that night in her safe, sunlit home, she dreamed not of bruises and fear, but of tomorrow. Of the foundation growing and helping more people. Of Rachel's graduation. Of the life she was building with Dominic, brick by patient brick. She dreamed of a future where no woman would have to hide her pain. Where power would protect instead of harm. Where courage would triumph over cruelty. And when she woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her windows and the sound of waves outside, Sophie smiled. Because that future wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. It was here. It was hers.